Hey everybody, it's Pete Toll. Wanted to make another video. This one's a little bit different than what I normally do. This one I wanted to go over the player positions that I think need updated for the next NBA 2K22 official roster update. That has basically that's going to be for the first ratings update of the year. So pretty much like a major big update. Because usually what 2K does is in that first ratings update, they go ahead and take care of the player positions based on any changes that are needed. So I'm going to go off of the official 2K roster just to kind of go through these. So starting with the 76ers. Looking at it, Shake Milton should be moved to the point guard position as his primary. Secondary position should be shooting guard. Isaiah Joe has played point guard a lot this year, backing up Tyrese Maxey because Ben Simmons is out. And so I think moving Isaiah Joe to the point guard spot should be beneficial for this. Gets him playing time in the rotation, especially with Milton out, and then with Ben Simmons out, and then Jaden Springer has played all of his minutes as a two guard in any lineups as well. And then moving over to the shooting guard spot should be Matisse Thybulle because Furkan Korkmaz has solidified himself as the backup small forward to Danny Green. So Thybulle should be a shooting guard small forward. He's not really playing power forward this year because Georges Niang is in there as the power forward into the rotation. So that is the 76ers. Moving over to the Milwaukee Bucks. And Sandro Mamukelashvili should be moved to the center spot. You could put power forward as his secondary position if you want. Could easily do that. Yordios Kaliatzakis could be considered to the shooting guard position with secondary small forward. And then Pat Connaughton has played the shooting guard position this year with Dante DiVincenzo out as well. Grayson Allen starts. So shooting guard small forward for him. And then Jordan Nwora has played all of the small forward minutes there in the rotation. So those should definitely be considered for the Milwaukee Bucks. Looking at the Chicago Bulls. All right, so Alize Johnson is playing the center spot. He's backing up center because Tony Bradley's not really in the rotation, and then Marko Simonovic doesn't play at all. So Johnson backs up Nikola Vucevic there at center. That moves Patrick Williams. He's the starter at power forward. This was known at the beginning of the year that he would be the starter there. Javonte Green is a small ball four. And that's crazy. People say, oh, no, look at the height difference between Troy Brown and Javonte Green. Brown and DeRozan would play the power forward spot and Green would play small forward. But if you watch the Bulls, you'll know that Javonte Green is, in fact, playing the power forward spot. Secondary position should be small forward. Moving over to the guard lineup, Kobe White last year played shooting guard and point guard. This year he's going to play the shooting guard spot upon his return because they have Alex Caruso in there as the de facto backup point guard. So moving Kobe White to the shooting guard position with secondary point guard position would be beneficial as far as the rotation goes and what White is expected to play. And then you could argue Ayo Dosunmu. He plays both guard positions. If you wanted to, this is subjective, but if you wanted to move him to the two, you could. He does get some minutes at the one as well. I would move him to the shooting guard position because I think at some point they'll move off of Matt Thomas, and so then you would have DeSunmu and White there as the shooting guards, backing up Levine with Caruso, Ball, and Dotson as the point guards. So that's the Chicago Bulls. Moving over to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Kevin Pangos has played strictly point guard. I don't know where 2K got shooting guard as the position for Pangos, but he should be a point guard. So that's the first change there. Denzel Valentine has played shooting guard this year. Yes, in the past he played small forward with the Bulls, but he's strictly playing shooting guard there. And then Isaac Okoro is playing the shooting guard position, backing up Colin Sexton this year, and kind of a new wrinkle in JB Bickerstaff's lineups since they did go out and get so many bigs. Speaking of bigs, two of them here. Lamar Stevens has played the small forward position. Last year he played both small forward and power forward. This year he's playing more small forward, so his positioning should be primary small forward, secondary power forward. And then Lauri Markkanen is now the starter at small forward, so he would shift, obviously, primary small forward, secondary power forward, and then that would take care of those lineups there. And then you could leave Evan Mobley, Kevin Love, and Dean Wade in there. Kevin Love, you could make a case that he does play backup center some, or you could make a case that Mobley shifts over and then Love comes in. Either way, how you look at it, I left Kevin Love off of the switching him to center since we're already moving Markkanen, and then Mobley would be the starter anyway. And so that takes care of the Cleveland Cavaliers changes. Going over to the Boston Celtics. So looking at the Celtics, Al Horford is a power forward with the Celtics. That was known from the get-go that he was going to be the power forward as a primary, secondary center. So that's the first change you have to make. And then that shifts everybody down in the lineup. Jason Tatum should shift to small forward, power forward. Jaylen Brown should shift to shooting guard, small forward. And then Marcus Smart should shift to point guard, shooting guard to make those appropriate changes. Juan Hernan-Gomez should be a power forward / small forward. And then Romeo Langford has actually played more small forward this year than he's played shooting guard because they now have Josh Richardson, and then they play the combo lineup of Pritchard and Schroeder off the bench. So Langford should be a small forward primary position, secondary shooting guard position. So that's the Boston Celtics. And looking at the Los Angeles Clippers, this one's interesting because we have in the default roster, you have Reggie Jackson and Eric Bledsoe both as the starting as at point guard. When it was kind of known in the offseason, they brought in Bledsoe to start. So Reggie Jackson should actually be a shooting guard primary, secondary point guard. Paul George should shift to primary small forward, secondary power forward, as he's played a lot of small ball four for them. And then Brandon Boston Jr. should shift to small forward as he has played only minutes in the preseason, but a lot of those came at small forward rather than shooting guard. And then Amir Coffey has played the power forward position more than he's played the small forward position this year. So he should be primary, power forward, secondary, small forward. And then what I've done in my roster is I've shifted Kawhi Leonard to the shooting guard spot as his primary, secondary, small forward, so that if you're playing a My NBA, the computer AI will not know that, you know, Kawhi is basically injured because it takes injuries off unless you play with injuries. And so that doubles up if you're switching Paul George, that doubles up the positions, and Paul George would actually come off the bench behind Kawhi Leonard as the sixth man, and then that gives no minutes to Terrence Mann or Justice Winslow. So I recommend shifting Kawhi Leonard to the shooting guard spot, so once he's healthy, he can play there, and Paul George would play the small forward. Another change is Justice Winslow has been playing the backup center spot this year. Serge Ibaka has been out the entire season, and so both Justice Winslow and Marcus Morris has kind of split time as a backup there. So Justice Winslow should be a center with a secondary position of power forward because he's playing a little bit of power forward in spots as well. It was thought that he would play point guard, but with the emergence of Eric Bledsoe getting minutes and then the ability to switch Reggie Jackson over to the point guard spot when needed, they don't really have a need to play Winslow at point guard. Marcus Morris should have a secondary position of center, not small forward. And then moving over to the Memphis Grizzlies, looking at the Grizzlies, they're interesting because they only have one shooting guard on the roster, which DeAnthony Melton is starting right now at shooting guard because Dylan Brooks is injured with his wrist injury. And so with that injury, it kind of shifts the lineups out of balance because you have Desmond Bane at small forward, whereas if Dylan Brooks is healthy, Desmond Bane will start at the 2. So I recommend going ahead and shifting Desmond Bane to the shooting guard position, secondary small forward. And then John Conchar this year has played a combo guard role. So his primary position should be shooting guard. His secondary position should be point guard. And then that leaves Zaire Williams getting minutes at small forward. Jarrett Culver should also be switched. He should actually switch over to the point guard spot as he played point guard all preseason with a secondary shooting guard position. Kyle Anderson should switch to small forward as a primary, secondary power forward. Now, he can play power forward a good bit, but once I think the rotation's fully healthy, I think Kyle Anderson will play small forward because that shifts Bane to shooting guard, and then that gives minutes to Brandon Clark and Xavier Tillman here. And last but not least for the Grizzlies, Killian Tilly should be moved to a power forward center role. Tilly is strictly a stretch guy that shoots threes, so putting him in the power forward role is better. Santi Aldama played both center and power forward in the preseason, so I'm just leaving him as the third string center for depth chart purposes. Next up, we have the Atlanta Hawks, and Lou Williams should be moved to the shooting guard as a primary, secondary point guard position, and as he won't see a ton of minutes this season with other guys healthy and things like that. And then in the preseason when he did play at the shooting guard position because the Hawks wanted to see DeLon Wright run the offense, and then Sharif Cooper excelled at passing and things like that. So that's where he's most comfortable. So there's not a lot of minutes at point guard for Lou Williams. So he shifts over to the 2 to get him a little bit more time. The Miami Heat, they don't have a ton of changes. Here it would be Gabe Vincent switching over to the point guard spot with a secondary position of shooting guard as he's played the backup point guard position with Victor Oladipo hurt. That moves Caleb Martin to the small forward spot as well, as all his minutes have come from there. Secondary position should be shooting guard. And then Udonis Haslem, in the very limited minutes he did play in the preseason, he did play them at center. The Charlotte Hornets, looking at them, yes, they have a lot of centers here, but PJ Washington has played primary backup center. And so his primary position should be center, secondary should be power forward. And then Jalen McDaniel should move to the primary power forward, secondary small forward. Cody Martin should move to primary shooting guard, secondary small forward. And then that pretty much, sums up the Charlotte Hornets. They have been surprisingly, really good this season, with the lineup combinations that they've put together. The Utah Jazz, their changes are Bojan Bogdanovic should be the small forward with a secondary power forward, and Royce O'Neal should be the primary power forward, secondary small forward. Jared Butler should be primary point guard, secondary shooting guard. And that's their changes. The Sacramento Kings, they should have Harrison Barnes as a power forward primary, secondary small forward. Mo Harkless should be a primary small forward, secondary power forward, because Marvin Bagley doesn't play in the rotation. Terrence Davis should be primary shooting guard, secondary small forward. Buddy Hield should be primary small forward, secondary shooting guard, as he's played most of his minutes coming in for Mo Harkless in lineups, as they like to play Mitchell and Fox together with Halliburton sometimes. So, it's a really small lineup, but Hield primarily plays a small forward position now. The New York Knicks, they have, so Kevin Knox should be a power forward primary, secondary small forward. Wayne Selden should be primary small forward, secondary shooting guard. Miles McBride should be primary point guard, secondary shooting guard. And then that takes care of their changes. The Lakers, they're, Trevor Ariza should be primary small forward, secondary power forward. Right now they haven't played the small lineup, so I'm leaving that alone. It's proposed that Davis would shift to the 5, LeBron to the 4 and stuff. If that happens later on in the season, I'll replicate that in my roster notes for that. So the Orlando Magic, Terrence Ross should be a primary small forward, secondary shooting guard. He's come in behind Franz Wagner as the primary option at small forward, so that's where he should shift. And I'm not going to move Wendell Carter Jr. To primary power forward, but I think that he needs to have a secondary position added of power forward, so that way it can replicate the bigger lineup while Isaac and Okeke are out of the lineup. The Dallas Mavericks, they have Kristaps Porzingis should be a power forward / secondary center. Sterling Brown should be primary shooting guard, secondary small forward. Eugene Amoroyi should be a power forward, primary, secondary small forward. Reggie Bullock should be a primary small forward, secondary shooting guard. Trey Burke should be primary point guard, secondary shooting guard. Frank Ntilikina should be primary shooting guard, secondary point guard. The Brooklyn Nets changes. Kyrie Irving should be moved to shooting guard as a primary, secondary point guard. He's out, obviously, everybody knows, because of personal reasons. James Harden is a de facto point guard. He was the point guard last season as well, with Kyrie playing the shooting guard position. So Harden should be primary point guard, secondary shooting guard. And DeAndre Bembry should be the small forward as a primary, secondary shooting guard. As Javon Carter seen most of the minutes as the backup shooting guard, and then Cam Thomas has sprinkled in a little bit of minutes as well. Then we go to Blake Griffin, should be a primary power forward, secondary center. He did start in the small ball lineups, or bigger lineups, I should say, at power forward. Kessler Edwards should be a small forward as a primary, secondary power forward. I don't really know where 2K got that he's a power forward, so to speak. And you could make a case for Bruce Brown moving to small forward or power forward as their primary, as I think he would excel in both, especially the power forward role. We move over to the Denver Nuggets. Zeke Nnaji should be the power forward as a primary, secondary center, as his minutes usually come in garbage time with Bol Bol. Bol Bol plays the center, while Nnaji plays the power forward spot. Another note for the center power forward spot is JaMychal Green. JaMychal Green should be the center as his primary, secondary power forward. Vlatko Konchar should be a small forward, primary, secondary power forward. And that's it for the Denver Nuggets. Let's see. Indiana Pacers. Let's see. The Pacers should have Torrey Craig move to the power forward spot as his primary. His secondary should be small forward. He's been kind of splitting minutes with O'Shea Brissett behind Sabonis once Sabonis moves to the center spot. And then that's going to be it for the Indiana Pacers changes, as Jeremy Lamb has filled in admirably as the small forward, off the bench. Holiday starts. So that allows Chris Duarte, with the injury to LeVert, to start at shooting guard. So that's the Pacers. The New Orleans Pelicans, they actually do not really have any changes because Josh Hart went down with an injury, which opened up minutes for Najee Marshall and Herb Jones at the small forward spot, because Ingram switches over to power forward as a starter with Zion out. And then Herbert Jones is able to find his rhythm once they bring him in to play behind Brandon Ingram, who basically starts at power forward essentially, which then allows either Herb Jones or Najee Marshall to start at small forward. The other one is Dalton Holmes. Last year in the G League, played primary minutes as a small forward, so I think sliding him over there doesn't hurt at all. And then I left Tomas Satoransky alone as a point guard because he splits minutes kind of with Kyra Lewis, depending on what they want to do in the rotation. But he's more than capable, obviously, of playing shooting guard or small forward. But I kind of limited him lately moving over to the shooting guard spot, because really you could move him to shooting guard and then Garrett Temple slides up to the 3, but then it mucks up the these guys right here from that spot. So I just leave him at point guard and let him slide over as needed from there. The Detroit Pistons, the first change should be Kelly Olynyk should be primary center, secondary power forward. Luka Garza, same thing, primary center, secondary shooting guard. Hamidou Diallo should be moved to shooting guard, small forward. And then Josh Jackson should be moved to small forward / shooting guard as he plays behind Sadiq Bey. And then Isaiah Livers should be moved to to the small forward / power forward position. I'm not quite sure which one he's going to play in the NBA, but he's capable of playing both. But he definitely does not play shooting guard. So not quite sure where 2K got that from. Cade Cunningham. Cade plays, or is expected to play once he's healthy, the shooting guard spot, as Killian Hayes will start at the point guard spot. The Toronto Raptors, Fred VanVleet should be the starting point guard, so he should be switched to primary power forward, secondary shooting guard. And then Shvi Mikhailuk should be moved to the small forward / shooting guard spot, as Mikhailuk has played a lot of his minutes at the 3. That way, they're able to stretch the floor easier, which, is a good thing. Justin Champagnie should be moved to power forward / small forward. Delano Banton should be moved to shooting guard, point guard. Oh, and Yuta Watanabe should be moved to power forward as a primary, secondary, small forward. Leave those there. Everybody else looks good. You could make a case because Sam Decker could potentially play power forward, but I'm leaving him since he hasn't played any minutes in the regular season yet, so I'm leaving him there at small forward. So that covers the Toronto Raptors. The Houston Rockets. So the first big change is Kevin Porter Jr. has long been known to be the starting point guard for the Rockets. Primary position should be point guard, secondary shooting guard. 2K has him as a shooting guard right now. Eric Gordon has played a lot of minutes at small forward in a smaller ball lineup, and then a secondary shooting guard, so he should be moved to small forward. And Daniel House has played a good bit of minutes at power forward, so his minutes should come from there, which, then opens up. Daniel Tice should be the center as a primary / secondary power forward position, and Christian Wood should be the power forward as a primary / center as a secondary position. The San Antonio Spurs, Joe Wieskamp should be primary small forward, secondary shooting guard. Keita Bates-Diop should be a power forward / center. And that's all, or actually, I went ahead and switched Zach Collins over to the center spot because I think that once he comes back, he'll play more center than he will power forward. And then Devontae Cacok should be moved to the power forward spot as a secondary position should be center, as he's only 6'7". Even though he did play center in the past, he also played a fair amount of power forward in the G League as well. The Phoenix Suns, Jalen Smith should be moved to power forward, as he's a guy that likes to stretch the floor. Frank Kaminsky should be moved to the center as his primary, secondary as power forward. Chandler Hutchinson should be moved to primary small forward, secondary power forward. And then Ish Wainwright, who was just signed last week to a 2-way contract, has played the power forward position in Summer League as well as in the preseason for the Raptors, and is expected to play the same position for the Phoenix Suns. And so that's the Suns. The Oklahoma City Thunder, Trey Mann should be a shooting guard / point guard. Ty Jerome should be a shooting guard / small forward, as he plays small forward in a lot of 3-guard lineups. Lou Dort should be switched to Lou Dort should stay at the shooting guard position. Josh Giddey should be switched to the small forward position, as Giddey starts there at that small forward position. And then that leaves Vic Krejci there, and Krejci should be moved to the point guard / shooting guard position. And then that leaves Alexis Pokashevsky should be moved to the power forward primary, secondary small forward. He doesn't really play as much small forward this year as he did in the past. Isaiah Roby should be primary center, secondary power forward. And then Jeremiah Robinson Earl should be primary center, secondary power forward. And Derek Favors should have power forward removed as a secondary position. Next up is the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, first change should be Taurean Prince as a primary small forward, secondary power forward. Okogie is a starter, but Prince comes in as his backup. Next is Leandro Bolmaro, primary small forward, secondary shooting guard. And then that will take care of all the changes for the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Portland Trailblazers, the first change should be Greg Brown moved to the power forward position. Secondary could be small forward. Next is moving CJ Ellaby to the small forward position, secondary shooting guard position. And then lastly should be Anthony Simons moved to the shooting guard position. Secondary should be point guard. The Golden State Warriors, the first change should be Nemanja Bjelica, changed to primary position center, secondary power forward. Nemanja has been very crucial to stretching the floor for Golden State, so that's a good change there. Otto Porter Jr. should be a primary small forward, secondary power forward. Moses Moody should be a primary shooting guard, secondary small forward. Jonathan Kuminga is expected to play more power forward, especially as he eases his way back to the Warriors when he plays with Santa Cruz. He will be more the power forward / small forward that's athletic. Gary Payton II should be moved to backup point guard as he plays the backup role lately with Andre Iguodala out. And then, speaking of Iguodala, you could make a case for him to move to the small forward spot, secondary point guard spot, if you don't want to keep him at power forward / point guard. Last team is the Washington Wizards. The Wizards changes. Kyle Kuzma should be a primary power forward, secondary small forward. Corey Kispert should be a primary shooting guard, secondary small forward, as he gets some minutes there. Contavious Caldwell-Pope should be a primary small forward as he starts there, secondary shooting guard. And then that, pretty much wraps up the Washington Wizards. So hope everybody enjoyed this video. Let's see kind of what that first ratings update brings as far as player positions. I'll go back through once that update is released and do a live kind of stream / video of what I found and what still needs to be tweaked and just stuff like that. So thanks everybody for watching. Make sure you please subscribe. Also, please don't forget to like this video. Comment below as well if you see any other changes you think should be made. And I will see everybody next time.